A few months back, I had to move out of my home for work-related reasons, and there was a waiting period of a couple of months before I could settle into my new place. Since my job allows me to work remotely, I chose to stay at my close friend Amy's family holiday home. The house, located in the quiet village where I grew up, is often vacant, and I've known both the family and the house well since childhood. It's a large, two-story home with 5 bedrooms, situated in a secluded part of the village, surrounded by forest and other unoccupied holiday houses. Although the idea of staying there alone could be unnerving, especially since I'm a 27-year-old woman, I didn't want fear to hold me back. To feel safer, I took some precautions before moving in. I planned to meticulously check all doors and windows, thoroughly search every room, look under beds, and inspect all wardrobes to ensure the house was empty and secure. I decided to keep it that way by always locking up carefully, reassured that no spare keys existed. My mother, who lives nearby, joined me for the initial inspection. Early on, we hit a snag with 2 glass patio doors that weren't locking properly. They could be slid open easily. One door faced the garden, and the other led from the patio to the house, meaning someone could enter the patio from outside and potentially get inside. After consulting with Amy, we agreed that a locksmith should fix at least one of the doors, depending on the cost. Thankfully, the locksmith was able to change both locks at an affordable rate. She warned me, though, that the door facing the garden was still somewhat vulnerable. However, the door connecting the patio to the house was secure, so I wasn't too concerned. I felt comfortable knowing I'd be safe inside, even if someone could access the patio. At first, living there alone was a bit unsettling, but the serene surroundings and the cozy atmosphere quickly put me at ease. I spent my days by the fireplace, enjoying good food, and soaking up the fresh air, feeling free and happy. During my initial days, I noticed one odd thing: a third glass door that I was certain I had checked earlier was no longer locking. This door was right next to the one the locksmith had fixed. I felt a bit guilty, thinking I had overlooked it, causing Amy's family to spend extra money. After 2 peaceful months, a friend visited, and we spent the evening chatting before I drove him back to his village, an hour away. When leaving, he even remarked on how thoroughly I locked up, and I explained how important feeling secure was to me. I returned around 10 p.m., and as I locked the door behind me, I was suddenly overwhelmed by an intense feeling of unease and goosebumps, even on my scalp. Though the house was secure, my instincts told me something wasn't right. As I entered the kitchen, I noticed a small, blue plastic bag on the floor, a type used for making ice cubes. It seemed out of place since it was usually stored in a drawer on the other side of the kitchen. I hadn't used it, and when I checked with my friend, he confirmed he hadn't touched it either. Growing uneasy, I grabbed a baseball bat and planned to check the house. My gut, however, urged me to leave, so I went to my mother's place and spent the night there. A few days later, my mother and I returned to thoroughly inspect the house. Nothing was missing or disturbed, and everything was just as I had left it. I brushed it off, thinking perhaps my friend had handled the bag by accident and forgotten. I resumed enjoying life in the house. About a month later, I began hearing strange sounds that gradually unsettled me. One evening around 9 p.m., I decided to recheck the entire house. Everything on the ground floor was normal, but upstairs, I was startled to find the light on in one of the bedrooms. I rarely entered these rooms, so they were always closed and dark. Nervously, I approached a wardrobe but felt a shiver when I noticed an unfamiliar black fabric sheath on top of it, a case large enough to hold something substantial, possibly a knife. I opened the wardrobe, found it empty, but couldn't shake the unease about the sheath. That night, I slept at my mother's house again. The next day, I confirmed with Amy that no one from her family had been in the house. Then I started reconsidering the patio's third door. After reviewing my initial check, it seemed unlikely I'd missed a lock, especially since the locksmith had inspected the area. Amy and I speculated that maybe an old tenant from an Airbnb stay had made a copy of the keys. I contacted another locksmith, who examined the third door and found that the screws securing the lock to the frame had been loosened. She also confirmed that the garden door lock, which had already been weak, was tampered with similarly. These findings made it clear this wasn't a coincidence. Someone had deliberately made the doors easy to open. Realizing that someone might have had a routine entry into the house despite my efforts to secure it, I made the decision to leave the house for good. My daughter and I just got back from our trip to Virginia, where we had reserved an Airbnb for 6 nights but ended up leaving after only 3. The host was kind and welcoming, displaying that familiar Southern hospitality, yet something felt wrong from the very first night. She had given us a 7-digit door code that she'd memorized, but it was hard for me to remember, and as a result, we locked ourselves out almost immediately after starting to unload our bags. Frustrated, I went over to the host's house to ask for the code again. The host invited us inside, but things quickly felt strange. She offered us drinks, which seemed nice, but then she started asking my daughter an unusual amount of random questions. At one point, she even told me to stay quiet because she wanted only my 8-year-old to respond. This made me feel instantly uneasy, like something was off. Later, as we were leaving, she reminded us to close the curtains in the house, even though she said it was a safe area. Her tone made it seem like she was hiding something, and I couldn't shake the feeling. The property was large, secluded, and surrounded by open fields and trees, with no neighbors in sight. That first night, I kept hearing something that sounded like a large bug bumping repeatedly into the mini-split unit in the bedroom, but I was too exhausted from our 18-hour travel day to pay much attention. The second night, however, was different. While lying in bed, I heard a strange metallic tapping sound coming from the bathroom connected to the second-floor bedroom. My daughter managed to sleep through it, but I felt increasingly on edge and unsettled, convincing myself it was just travel nerves. During our stay, I noticed some other odd things too. Each time we returned, the fan I'd left on was mysteriously turned off. In the bathroom, there was a small, adjustable mirror, the only one there, which could be angled up or down. I kept finding it tilted down to a height that would suit a child. At first, I assumed my daughter was adjusting it, so I'd just fix it. But on the last day, after setting it upright, I went downstairs to check on her while she was coloring. When I returned, the mirror was once again tilted down, which startled me. By the third night, the strange occurrences were becoming too overwhelming. I felt like we were somehow being watched. That evening, my daughter went to shower and told me she was closing the bathroom door to keep the lightning bugs from watching her. Normally, she's outgoing, never minds having the bathroom door open while showering, and wants me nearby, so her comments suggested that she, too, felt something unsettling, even if she couldn't articulate it. We finally went to bed, and my daughter quickly fell asleep, but I couldn't rest. I felt increasingly anxious, something I don't usually experience, and started having panic attacks. Then the noises began again, even louder and more persistent than on previous nights. The metallic clinking in the bathroom grew louder and faster, and I could hear sounds as though someone was moving items around on the counter. At one point, it even sounded like a glass had been dropped. Shortly after, I heard the closet door across from our bed open, bumping against my suitcases that were in its way. These noises went on for hours, and every instinct told me to get out, to protect my daughter and leave as quickly as possible. The next morning, I went into the bathroom and saw small, muddy footprints coming out of the shower. I couldn't make sense of it. My daughter hadn't been playing in mud, and even if she had, there should have been tracks leading from the front door, where we'd taken our shoes off. The sight of those footprints was the last straw. Everything felt so wrong. I began packing up our bags immediately, feeling an overwhelming urge to leave. After 2 nights of not returning, the host messaged me, offering an extra night free, but I didn't respond. It took days for me to process the experience. It was terrifying for both my daughter and me. I want to start by saying I'm not entirely convinced about the existence of ghosts, but what I went through in that house was truly odd, and I still don't have an explanation. The strange occurrences only lasted about 2 weeks, ending after someone came to cleanse the place. From 2019 to 2021, I was stationed at Aviano Air Base in northern Italy with the US Air Force. During that time, I moved into a house with a close friend from tech school and his wife. Living there made me rethink my skepticism about ghosts. I went from not believing in them at all to almost thinking they might be real. I'm still not fully convinced, though, because I don't think anyone can be sure of what causes these strange events. The first week in the house was completely normal, without any unusual incidents. But after that, I started experiencing intense nightmares every night. Although I can't remember what they were about, they left me feeling uneasy and scared each morning. Nearly every time I woke up from these dreams, I would find myself in sleep paralysis, unable to move, feeling trapped, and terrified. I'd hear a quiet whooshing sound in my ears that would grow louder until it became almost unbearably intense. Once, I woke up drenched in cold sweat, feeling disoriented and scared. As I looked around, I saw a dark figure at the foot of my bed, slowly rising as if reaching toward me. Suddenly, it felt like it was lifting my legs off the bed. Just then, I snapped back to reality, probably jolted awake by the rush of adrenaline, and realized it hadn't been real. But the experience was so vivid and intense that it left me genuinely frightened. My roommates mentioned they were also having nightmares, though not as frequently or as vividly as mine. Some nights, after waking up from these dreams, I would hear noises downstairs, which sounded like cabinets opening and closing and the clinking of silverware and pots. My roommates, who also slept upstairs, could hear it too. I didn't dare check since I was already shaken up from the nightmares. My roommates, who had more experience with paranormal things, went to a store to buy some dried sage and a bead necklace for my protection, even though I was skeptical. I never took that necklace off while in the house. But when we tried to burn the sage inside, it wouldn't light at all. No matter how long we held a flame to it, the sage just wouldn't catch fire. When we took it outside, however, it burned immediately. We brought it back inside to try again, but once more, it refused to light. Maybe it was due to humidity in the house, or maybe something else, but it gave us an uneasy feeling. That same night, my friend and I woke up at the exact same time, both craving a midnight snack. The house was silent as we stepped into the hallway, but as soon as we greeted each other, the noises started up again, the same clinking and movement sounds from downstairs. We stood still in the hallway, listening, trying to make sense of it. And then, suddenly, without warning, the bead necklace my roommates had given me for protection snapped. The beads scattered all over the floor, even though nothing had touched it. The final straw for my roommates came when they said they saw the entity itself. I'm not sure if I fully believe them, but here's what they described. One day, while they were eating in the kitchen, they were sitting facing the glass door that led to the patio. Through the reflection, they could see the hallway behind them, and both of them claimed to see an elderly woman walking past the doorway. They said neither of them spoke, they just looked at each other and immediately headed upstairs to their rooms. After that encounter, they decided to call someone for help, a curandero or something similar, a type of Mexican healer or spiritual guide. He told them that we were at risk and performed a ritual to clear whatever was in the house. I don't know exactly what he did, but after he finished, the strange events stopped completely, and I was finally able to get a good night's sleep. This has been my only paranormal experience, and I'm still uncertain about what it all means.